Hey, FedHeads, welcome back to another episode of Sharing Our Pairings. I'm your host, Trip, here with my co-host, Dennis. We're broadcast around the world on the Armed Forces Radio Network, live on Facebook.com, and, of course, available as a podcast on your favorite podcast catcher, or you can catch us after the show on YouTube. It's been a little while. We took a couple weeks off. We took a week off for Thanksgiving. And then I kind of last minute had to go out of town for work last week. So we weren't able to do any shows last week. But luckily we didn't have a guest scheduled with coming right off of the holiday. But anyway, we're back here with Sharing Our Pairings. We're going to smoke some cigars, drink some beverages. Here with my co-host, Dennis. Dennis, how you doing?
Hey, Trippy. It's good to be back, man. Back stateside. Feels great.
Yeah, so that's what I wanted to start off with. Let's introduce our cigar, and then we'll talk about your little adventure there. So the cigar we're smoking today is the latest Tatuaje Monster. See if my camera can focus there. So this is the Micheal, and as we were talking about before the show, this has had a very controversial release. It seems like a lot of people just aren't a big fan of this cigar. I'm really digging it so far.
Yeah, there's a lot of chatter. I like it so far as well.
So this is the Micheal, named, of course, after Michael Meyers from the classic Halloween, directed by John Carpenter. It is a 6.5 by 52 Ecuadorian Habano, wrapped over a Nicaraguan binder and Nicaraguan fillers. I'm digging it so far. As I was saying before the show, it reminds me a little bit of like the vibe of an Opus X. It's kind of got that classic spicy Habano flavor. Kind of some raisins and cinnamon in there. I'm digging it.
Yeah, I'm getting some black pepper off of it too, and I like that a lot. That's, for me, when I go for a cigar, that's generally the first thing I kind of look for.
Yeah, a serious hit of black pepper. And before I move on, actually, I do want to say one thing. Speaking of black pepper, yesterday I smoked a Padron 45th. 45 years. Because as I'm sure you know, and as I'm sure most of our listeners know, Jose Padron passed away this week at the age of 91. He was if you've ever smoked a Padron cigar, which chances are you have. I mean, if you've never smoked a Padron, you probably haven't been smoking very long, because they're kind of the gold standard for, Nicaraguan cigars. And, it's just after something like 60 or 70 years in the industry, it felt like a good time to smoke that cigar. So, our condolences go out to the Padron family. I haven't met Jose. I have met George and a couple of the other family members. But anyway, back to the cigar. So these, as always, they released 666 boxes. The second week in October, I think, is when they usually do it. 666 dress boxes, of course, to the dress box retailers, and then 4,500 plain boxes, which is kind of the typical number for the monsters. And then, as usual, they retail for $13 per stick. I managed to pick up a box from my friends at Corona for a pretty good price. And if you're interested, boxes are still out there. I mean, you're not going to find a dress box. The dress box is like the holy grail of cigars.
Yeah, they're gone by now.
It's insane how people clamor for those. But the non-dress boxes are actually pretty easy to find. With the first release with like the Frank, they were really hard to find, because it kind of was this crazy thing, like, who releases 600 boxes and then separate boxes, and it was just a weird thing at the time. But I remember they were very quickly came hard to find. But after I think it was the face or so, is when they started really ramping up production, and it started getting a lot easier to find the cigars just on the shelf. I expect they'll be around for a couple years, kind of like you can't really find mummies anymore, but you can still find hides and Jekylls.
Yeah, they're still around somewhere. Yep.
Yeah, they're still available out there.
And then, of course, you have the secondary markets, obviously, and those are, if you guys are looking for dress boxes, that's the place to go.
Well, you're going to pay a pretty penny. I've seen dress boxes, full, like, sealed dress boxes, I've seen go for $600 or $700. It's crazy.
Easily. It's insane.
So now let's talk about your little vacation that you went on. Where'd you go?
Yeah, so I was down in Cuba for the Partagas Festival, for a week, and man, you hear all these things about Cuba, and most of them are true, pretty much. It really is a wild place, I have to say. You know, there's something that a lot of people don't understand. I didn't get it until I got to Cuba, that there's such a thing called Cuban time. When you get to Cuba, you're on Cuban time, man. And, if you make an appointment, if you make a meeting, you say, I'm going to meet you at 3 o'clock. If they show up at 6, you can't be mad. That's just the way it is. It's Cuba. And this actually came in handy later in the week when I got viciously sick, and no one's fault, but I got horribly ill. And, I just had to go with it. It's Cuba. What else are you going to do, right?
Yeah, what are you going to do? So how was it? I've always wanted to go to Cuba, and I've always wondered what what it's like going to the Partagas Festival.
So the festival, what the best way for me to describe the festival is like, as I was sitting in the Hotel Nacional, in the early days, as people were starting to come in for the festival and meet up with each other and kind of get their bearings, and then eventually when I went to the actual shop and I was sitting in the smoking lounge that they have, the VIP room, sitting there and just kind of observing people coming in, it was a lot like if you've seen the movie Bloodsport, where all the fighters are just like, they're showing up at the hotel in the lobby and they're all kind of like eyeballing each other, and some guys know each other and other guys don't, and it's fascinating. So many different people from around the world, Saudi Arabia, Germany, the US, Canada. It's insane, and it's really cool. The presence alone, I think, is just that during that week is really insane.
Yeah, it sounds a lot like Puro Sabor, which we were talking about before in the green room.
Oh yeah.
I went last year, and there were people from, I believe it was 29 different countries, and it was only I think the way that Puro Sabor is done is kind of weird, because they have the group that goes on Puro Sabor, and that's like a core group of people. But then locals and cigar manufacturers and stuff can buy tickets and stuff. So at the lunches and the dinners, you've always got more people. But I think the tour groups that I was part of were like a total of 130 people.
Okay.
And to come from 30 different countries, that's a lot of variation there.
It's impressive. It's really impressive. And you know what? The cool thing that more than anything that I realized, sitting at the last night's gala dinner, you have all these different people, and a lot of these people are, whether they're retailers or they're in the business somewhere, or they're just fans and they love cigars and they wanted to come out. You have people from all walks of life, from all countries. Like, you have some guys that probably are millionaires with yachts, and just like people that normally you'd never, figure you'd be sitting at a dinner table with smoking a cigar and chatting. And cigars bring all these people together, and that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I always kind of like that.
That's what it's about at the end of the day.
Yeah, and it's all about enjoying cigars, and as we say, cigars are kind of I don't know, they kind of bring everybody to the same level, so that all you're thinking about is cigars, which, when you're geeking out about cigars, you can talk to anybody, no matter what they do, and no matter how much money they have, no matter what their life experience or age is, and you just kind of get along, and it's awesome. So my biggest question is something that I've heard from multiple sources within the industry, is at the Partagas Festival, after the gala dinner, it's just like a ravenous rampage of people stealing everything off the tables, like centerpieces and silverware, and people are stealing like plates and glasses and stuff. Did that really happen at the end of the night?
You know what? I actually didn't notice, but I can tell you they had every table had a bottle of Santiago de Cuba 25, which I'm not sure what the street value is. It might be a $2,000 a bottle of rum. I could be wrong. Don't quote me on that. But everybody's table had one, and I'm pretty sure they didn't care if you took it home. But I didn't see any plates or anything like that going missing.
Yeah, from what I've heard, people are just stealing anything that's not nailed down. They're taking placemat or tablecloths and just anything that they can. But maybe that was more at the Habano.
It was a very nice spread. It was a very nice spread. The dinner was beautiful.
So that's what the person was telling me is like these guys come up on their yacht with their 3 paid girlfriends that are like gorgeous. You can't believe how beautiful they are. And then they come into this and they're smoking their most expensive like $1,000 cigars that they have in their humidor. And then at the end of the night, they're just grabbing all the forks they can. I've just really wondered if that was true. So
you know what? I believe it.
We're not here just to talk about it, so I'm kind of ready to move on to drinking. Do you have any other like closing thoughts about the Partagas Festival?
You know what? I can talk for days about it. So maybe we can chat about it maybe after show or on another show. But the only thing I would say is this: shout out to John, Cigar Surgeon, for recommending this baby here, which is
oh, you managed to get one, huh?
Man, and you know, I got this little baby was only $20. And
that's what I've heard, like cheap dirt.
Man, you can kill somebody with this thing. It's so heavy, but it's beautiful. And I got a couple of them, and you know, thanks to him for hooking me up with that idea. They're incredible, very cool stuff. So that's a nice little memory to bring back.
Really good things about those.
Oh yeah, just beautiful craftsmanship. Absolutely.
All right, so we'll talk a little more about Cuba in the After Dark. But before we get to that, we're going to be drinking a little bit. So I'm going to introduce my first beverage here, kind of go through a little story time about it. So this is Early Times Bottled in Bond. This is fairly new. I'm not sure exactly when this release came out. Early Times is cheap bourbon. It's one of like I think I've read it's like the top 4 bourbon in the world. But it's cheap bourbon. But I grew up around it. So the company was started in 1923, and in the 50s they had grown into the highest selling whiskey brand in the country. And when I was a kid, my grandparents, both of my dad's parents, drank Early Times. It was all they drank. It was the only thing they kept in the liquor cabinet that they drank. They would keep stuff for guests, and it reminds me, like looking back, about how I do. Like, I have a bunch of bourbon, a bunch of scotch, and a bunch of gin. If you want anything else, you're out of luck in my house. Because I'm not like buying a bunch of mixers and cranberry juice and stuff like that. Like, if you want something like that, bring it yourself. But so on Thanksgiving, the day before Thanksgiving, I saw this bottle on the shelf, and I thought that would be the perfect bottle to drink with my dad. So I got it so that we could have a little glass of it on Thanksgiving. And, you know, just think about his parents. So it was nice. But, so this is Bottled in Bond. And the interesting thing about it is this is Kentucky Straight Bourbon Whiskey Bottled in Bond. And that's like 5 different classifications. Actually, I think it's 4 different classifications. So, obviously, Kentucky, you can't call it Kentucky unless it comes from Kentucky.
Yep.
Straight means that it cannot have any flavors added. It can't have anything but water and whiskey and time spent in wood. And then, of course, bourbon means that it's at least 51% corn. And then, and I think bourbon has a age requirement, but I don't remember what that is off the top of my head. I think it's 2 years. Bottled in Bond means that it has to be aged at least for 4 years. All of the spirit has to come from the same distillery, so you can't be mixing different ages and stuff like that from different distillers. It all has to come from the same year, from the same distillery, and it has to be aged 4 years. And my favorite part, it has to be bottled at 100 proof.
Oh, yeah.
And bottled in bond is a weird thing because it seems like the only whiskeys that I know of that are bottled in bond are cheaper whiskeys. Like this was $20. The only bottled in bond whiskeys I know of are between like $15 to $25. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's the age requirement, or maybe it's just that a lot of the bigger distillers or the more expensive whiskeys are kind of, like High West. None of their stuff could be bottled in bond because they're constantly experimenting. They're mixing stuff from different distilleries and ages, and you're not allowed to do that with this. So I'm going to take a couple sips while you talk about your first beverage there.
Dude, that looks so beautiful. Nice and dark. Oh,
yeah,
man.
Show it off. Yeah, it's like a nice dark amber. kind of color. It's a gorgeous whiskey, especially for $20. I mean, I'm kind of impressed with it. I mean, there you can see it a little better in the bottle. But for $20, I'm pretty impressed with this. It's a decent sipping whiskey.
Yeah, for $20 in New York, I'd probably get like Evan Williams Green at best, pushing it at best, like the finest with maybe a little string around it or something. But
you might get regular early times for $20. I think that's.
I have to look for
early
it.
times is $11.95 here. It's cheap stuff.
Oh wow, okay, I have to look for that. So I'm actually not drinking whiskey tonight. Unfortunately, I'm drinking beer. And my first beer of the night comes from a brewery that I've actually never heard of. It's the first time I'm trying it. It's called Catskill Brewery. And it's kind of cool label. They got a giant crawler of this thing. And this is their IPA. This is actually the Floodwatch IPA. And it's whole flower hopped with Simcoe and I believe Citra as well. It's about 5.7%. It's a really nice, easy drinking IPA. These guys are up in the Catskill, so it's about 2 hours from New York, roughly, give or take. And I had no idea, but they were open actually since 2014. So they've been open for a while, and I've never really seen their beers down here. A friend of mine hooked me up with this one. And their facility is actually really nice. I looked up into it a little bit, and they have a fully green facility. So as green as they possibly can be. They have solar panels, they have grass growing on the roof, they have a lot of plants everywhere, natural light coming into the facility. And right now their production facility is about 3,500 square feet. So, pretty good, not too bad at all.
Yeah, that's pretty decent size for somebody that new.
Yeah,
and especially if you're a couple hours away and you haven't heard of it.
Yeah, exactly. And they seem to be expanding pretty well. I don't know if they've opened it yet, but on the books, I know they wanted to open up a German-style beer garden.
Oh, nice.
And a distillery as well.
Those are always
on
fun.
The side. So they're always great. Absolutely.
We got a couple comments from the viewers here on Facebook. John O'Lernick says 1 bourbon, 1 scotch, and 1 beer. I didn't even realize that's what I was doing. I just wanted to get a range of beverages to try with this thing because I've only smoked one of these so far. This is my second one. And then Jose says, "Hey gents and sinners." He's an S&S guy. We're both. I think we're both firmly on the sinners side of the equation.
Oh yes, absolutely.
So the early times. I mean, like I said, this isn't going to drink like a $50 bottle of whiskey. It's definitely rough around the edges. It's got like kind of that freshly applied varnish kind of smell, which as I talk about every week, it sounds terrible, but it's not necessarily a totally bad thing. It's just kind of your taste. And it's got a little bit of that on the palate too, like that kind of like the sweet wood and ethanol coming together reminds me of the I don't know, just the smell of like that thick, heavy, sweet smelling varnish. I don't even know if you can buy anymore, but it's a smell that I remember from being a kid. Yeah,
I'm sure it's legal by now. But it's cool that you mentioned that. That's that homey sort of cozy smell that you would expect from a kind of whiskey that your grandfather would drink.
Yeah,
just
exactly.
Sitting around.
It reminds me. It makes me think. I mean, maybe it's just my memory, like imposing on my palate. But it reminds me of like the whiskey people would have drank in an older time. Like, it reminds me of a whiskey people would drink in the 50s. That's a little more rough around the edges. There's still a lot of flavor, but you're not gonna. This isn't the type of whiskey that's meant to be sipped and savored. It's the type of whiskey you should pour in a glass and drink at the end of a long day at work.
Yeah.
But
a flask going fishing.
Yeah, or it could be really good in a flask. I think it goes really well with the spice in this cigar, though. Like the spice and those raisin notes actually complement the kind of rough around the edges flavor of the whiskey. How's your first beer there?
I'm actually getting a lot of biscuit notes from the cigar, and to be fair, this IPA, normally I go for like the crazy double IPAs, super hopped, really juicy. This is a really nice, easy drinking IPA. It's still got some color to it, but it doesn't stay on the palate. It's not cloying on the palate, which is what you would want out of a basic IPA. You just want that flavor initially, and then you want it to dissipate a little bit, almost like almost like a lighter champagne, sort of, kind of the bubbly essence to it.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping for my beer coming up here. Another thing John Olernick said is he loves an old fashioned. I think this early times would actually be really good in an old fashioned.
Oh, that's a good idea.
Sweeten it up a little bit, soften out those rough edges. I think it would actually go really well with an old fashioned. We're going to take our first break here, and then we'll be right back talking more monsters.
Blended by Gurkha's blending team at American Caribbean Cigars. It's hand-rolled Nicaraguan, available in 35-count boxes. Talk to your local B&M about the heritage today, or talk to them about other fine Gurkha cigars. Whatever your taste preference is, Gurkha has a cigar that's right for you.
And we're back. So as we were talking about while you guys were watching that advertisement from one of our fine sponsors, we're getting a lot of like biscuity, bready, savory kind of notes from the cigar. The spice is really starting to drop off a little bit. There's still a little bit of black pepper, but it's not as intense as it was before. And I just realized that when I was talking about Padron, I started talking about Jose, and I forgot to mention the 45 years. That is the most pronounced pepper I've ever had in a cigar.
Oh, wow.
Like, it tastes like you're freshly ground pepper and then rubbing it on your tongue. It's so good, and it lasts the entire way through, but it's got like that. I've never tasted it in anything else where you get that spice and you get a lot of pepper, but in this, it had the flavor of pepper. And John Olernick wants to know what we're smoking, and we kind of went right past it at the beginning. So this is the latest in the Tatuaje Monster series. It looks a little black on my camera there.
And I think it's actually blue, right?
Yeah, it's kind of a navy blue to mimic Michael Meyers kind of coveralls that he wears. And then, of course, the white on the label is to represent his mask. So this is the Tatuaje Michael, which is the latest in the monster releases. It came out just about a month and a half ago. So these are still, I think they're still smoking a little bit fresh. I think I'm going to let the rest of my box sit for about 6 months before I break into another one. But we'll see.
To their credit, I have to say the burn is solid on this. It's smoking great. It's burning great. So for a fresh cigar, it's really in good shape.
Yeah, mine's canoeing a little bit, but that's my fault because I was talking too much. So before I get into my next beverage, I'm just going to touch up that burn there because sometimes no matter how good the construction is, if you mess up and talk too much like that, you can mess up the burn. So my next beer from Sierra Nevada, this is their Fresh Hop IPA. So they started doing these new 12 packs this year. I think they're new this year. I hadn't seen them before, but they're hop specific. So they had the last one, I believe, was a single hop pack where it was 4 different beers, but all of them use a single hop in common. This one is a pack of fresh hop beers. All 4 of the beers are fresh hop IPAs. So it's got a session IPA, it's got this fresh hop IPA, it's got a fresh hop double IPA, and then of course the old standby, their celebration winter beer, their winter seasonal, which is really a fresh hopped double IPA. And if you're not familiar with Sierra Nevada, you have not been drinking beer very long. They're practically the Padron of beers. They were started.
Good analogy.
Yeah, they were started in 1979 by a couple of home brewers in Chico, California, and now I believe they're in the top 3. I don't know if they're the number 1 selling craft beer. I know they're the 7th largest brewery in the country, which is crazy for a company that still kind of operates like a craft beer company. I mean, we were talking about it a little bit on Facebook over text or something, and they just don't put out bad beers very much. Like, they don't put out anything that tastes like a macro brew beer, where it's kind of like, at a certain point you can tell when a beer is quantity over quality. And all of their beers that I've ever tasted have been more focused on quality than quantity. And they've still got some really good seasonal releases, and their regular pale ale is passable for me. It's not something that I'm going to order every time I see it, but if it's the only craft beer on the menu, I'm going to order it and I'm going to like it. I mean, it's not like I'm not going to enjoy it. What's your next beer?
Yeah, I've been the same about Sierra as well. I've never had a bad beer. Their Bigfoot, I'm a huge fan of. I love that beer.
That barley wine is great.
It's fantastic, yeah, man. And so my next beer is a little bit weird. It's as normally I like to go, kind of the weird styles. Yeah. I'm going with a Stillwater, and this is actually Stillwater and I forgot what it was. It was a Dorchester Brewing Company. So for those of you that don't know, Stillwater is what's considered a gypsy brewing company. So they basically have a head brewer that designs the beers, that comes up with the recipes, and then he goes off to a proper brewery that has the equipment and brews all that stuff there. So this is one of their collaboration projects with Dorchester, and this is called I guess it's called the Nom Nom or Gnom Gnom. It depends how you want to say it. But it's really funky. It's a mango lemongrass chili IPA. It's actually a double IPA. So it comes in at 8%, which is honestly you don't taste it with this beer, and it's pretty light. This is one of those beers for me, with my palate, I would easily put this into the sessionable category. I think years ago I would have said this beer is insane, but because my palate has changed so much over the years toward the really heavy, strong, super hoppy, weird kind of IPAs, now this is a session beer for me.
So I forgot to mention mine, and I actually, while you were talking, I had to hunt for it on the can. My fresh hop IPA here is 6.4% ABV. And I also forgot to show off how gorgeous it is. I mean, it looks almost like a milkshake IPA. I wish you could see it backlit here. Like, looking at it against my lights, it's bright orange. It looks like Sunny Delight.
And what was the hop for that?
They don't actually say, but it's fresh, so it's got to be something from California or maybe Oregon.
Must be, yeah.
And cool. It's got exactly what I like in an IPA. It's light and crisp, but has like a little bit of that sticky, resiny kind of hop flavor that sticks to your palate. I'm not sure how it goes with a cigar yet. I'm gonna have to think about it while you're talking about yours. But for the beer itself, it's fantastic.
Mine is actually, you know what? I have to say the mango flavor is not like, even on the nose, mango flavor barely comes through, and on the tongue, it's mostly the lemongrass and the chili, which is pretty cool. Chili's not intense, so if you're used to chili beers and you don't like them, it's not that. It's not as intense. Mostly lemongrass. If you dig that kind of like fresh, zesty flavor, that's what this beer is.
Yeah, it's kind of that stout level of chili where like
yes, exactly.
It makes me think of Chocoveza and Prairie Bomb, where it's got the spice, but you're not really noticing it. Like if somebody didn't tell you there were peppers in there,
oh yeah,
you might not even know it because it's really just kind of like an afterthought on your palate.
And it's funny, actually, the chili spice comes out more with the cigar. And I think it works really well, very well with the cigar. It brings back some of that black pepper spice that was on the initial, first inch or so.
I was actually about to say the same thing. The hops in this beer, and that kind of like citrusy, hoppy sweetness, it really brings out the black pepper in this. I'm getting so much more like black and red pepper than I was before. And at this point, I wasn't noticing it as much before. The retrohale is so spicy. It's like an intense white pepper right now. And maybe that's because of the beer. Maybe it's not. But I actually think this is a cigar. So like for me, the two things that can stand up to an IPA as far as pairing a cigar goes is, I hate to say it because I know some people out there hate it, but Kentucky Fire Cured, whether it's just a little bit or it's something like the Drew Estate KFC, a little bit of that fire cured tobacco can really balance out the pairing with an IPA. But I feel like Ecuadorian Habano goes really well with IPA. If it's executed a certain way, which this one is, when it's like a sort of dry but spicy Habano, Ecuadorian Habano, where it's not overly sweet or anything like that, or overly chocolatey. This Habano is more like black pepper, dry hay, kind of a little bit of like that bready, caramelly kind of sweetness.
Yeah, that's actually what I was getting a lot of as well. And that's a good point. It really does take a certain type of cigar to fit well with an IPA and not overpower it and also not be underwhelmed.
Yeah.
And so far, I have to say, IPAs, man, this cigar is easy choice for me if I'm drinking IPA.
Yeah, I completely agree. I feel like this cigar could go really well with a range of IPAs. I thought about going vertical IPA with that Sierra Nevada pack that I talked about.
Oh, yeah.
But I thought that might be a little too risky, and I think now that it actually would have been an okay choice. So we're going to take our second break here. We'll be right back after a message from one of our sponsors.
Oasis. Don't spend all your time worrying about your cigar wrappers cracking, splitting, or falling apart from humidity fluctuation issues. Set it and forget it by choosing Cigar Oasis, a professional solution which provides equal distribution of humidity with precise electronic controls. Monitor your cigars to the internet using the Smart Humidor Wi-Fi attachment. Why don't you spend all your time enjoying your cigars and relaxing, and let Cigar Oasis protect your cigars? Cigar Oasis has solutions for any humidor. Make sure you set it and forget it today.
And we're back with sharing our pairings. For anybody who just joined, we're smoking the Tatuaje Monster, the latest one, the Micheal, based, of course, on the classic film Halloween by John Carpenter. I'm going to talk about my last pairing here. I'm not sure how this one's going to go. I'm going to say that before I introduce it. This one I'm really not sure about. This is a pairing that I think goes really well with the Tatuaje Black, which I would guess this shares fillers with. So I think it's going to be good, but we'll see. This is Ardbeg 10. For those who aren't familiar with Ardbeg, it's a Islay Scotch distillery. They make a fair amount of Scotch, but not as much as many. They make 1.25 million liters, which is 330,000 gallons per year, which isn't a ton. I mean, compared to people who are making 10 million gallons of Scotch a year, they're kind of one of the smaller distilleries. They've been around since 1798, but they didn't actually start producing commercial whiskey until 1815, which I've never been clear on what exactly that means. I feel like maybe they were making like whiskey for themselves or whiskey for people in the area and they weren't distributing it. I don't know. But the distillery was open for almost 20 years before they began commercially selling. I'm just not sure what that means. It is the weirdest looking Scotch to me. I mean, it's the color of champagne or white wine, but then you smell it,
it's and powerful, it smells,
huh? It smells like every peat bog in Islay is on fire at the same time. Like it smells like a tire fire in all the best ways. Oh, I love it. I'm gonna let you talk about yours while I take a couple sips of this Ardbeg. It's one of my favorites.
I love that. Tire fire. I think that's going to be my new thing. I'm going to start using that if it's okay with you.
Yeah, go for it.
It's beautiful. It fits perfectly. So my last beer I haven't poured yet because I thought I would pour it on the show. I got to shake it. It's pretty cool. I'm
so excited.
So this is another Stillwater collaboration, another one of those, gypsy brews. And this is actually with Oliver Brewing Company down in Maryland. Kind of cool can. Honestly, I bought it because I thought the can was really cool. It's called Whipped. It's a imperial stout with lactose and vanilla, or vanilla bean. I guess they put it in. It's 8%, pretty cool. But the fun thing about this is on nitro, and so it even says on the can. The can that you shake.
Can that you shake. That's why I messaged you earlier. It's like, do you really shake that when you?
I'm shaking it, giving it a nice little shake, I'm gonna pour it into my trusty Iron Maiden pint glass, which, for those of you beer geeks out there, yes, this does have nucleation points on the bottom. You probably can't see them, but it says Iron Maiden inside of the glass. It's points? Yeah, it's etched. It's etched into the bottom, which is fantastic. It's very cool. So I'm gonna pop this open, and I'm gonna dump it as hard as I can.
There you go.
And hopefully, if I did this right, if you give it a minute, and you may start to see some of that beautiful nitrogen coming out of suspension there.
I don't know what it is, but that's one of the most satisfying things to see. Like when you get a nitro cap and you see that, it's just beautiful. Especially, my favorite thing is when you get an IPA like that. That's on nitro. Yeah. And it's like a hazy IPA, and you get that effect, but it's not black like you're used to. It's like bright gold. I don't know. That's like a beer geek satisfaction thing.
It's one of those things. Unless you experience it, you can't really share the magic of that moment. Which sounds crazy, but we're beer guys, and other beer guys may get it. And it's nice. You get a nice, cool, creamy head, but this is not the typical creamy head you get from a beer. This is like thick milkshake.
Yeah, that looks like
insane
you could set a cherry on top.
Yes,
and it would just sit there.
I could probably take the cigar and stick it on top, and it'll stay there.
So Jose said very peaty, and he thinks it might overpower the cigar in reference to my Ardbeg. He's correct. Unfortunately, the peat is just too much for it. I mean, this is a really weird whiskey, which is one of the things I really like about it, because it's super peaty, but it's got a very, very light body. And the problem with that is when you're pairing it with something like this, I barely taste the smoke anymore because of the peat, and because of the smoke, I don't taste any of the nuances that are in the Ardbeg. So this is just a bad pairing in all the wrong ways. But how's that stout? Oh man, that looks amazing.
It's so thick. It's incredibly thick, but it's really well balanced. If you like stouts, if you don't like stouts, you'd love this beer. It's sweet. It's actually, I think the lactose, they kicked it up a little bit than what you typically see in most lactose-based beers. And the vanilla pops. It really just comes out. So it's got this really nice like vanilla ice cream milkshake type deal with a little bit of coffee, but not much. And as good as the beer is, I'd say that it doesn't necessarily fit too well with the cigar. It doesn't overpower, but I feel like they're kind of fighting each other for flavor.
I feel like that's more of a broadleafy kind of beer.
Yes. Yeah, it definitely needs something with a little bit more body to it.
Yeah, right. So we both went awry with our final pairings here, but that's all right. For anybody watching who might have noticed, I went back to my beer because this cigar just goes so well with an IPA. It's kind of unbelievable. I wasn't expecting it to go that well because, like I said, it reminds me a lot of the Tatuaje Black. I mean, it's at the very least, it's got the same wrapper. We know that much. The fillers, I'm assuming, are at least somewhat different. But the black, I feel like, goes really well with a peated Scotch, and this one gets a little bit overpowered.
Yeah, I think the black, that's a good point, too. The black is a little bit, I want to say almost bolder. It's a little bit more, those edges are a little bit sharper on the cigar, so it can withstand a stronger drink pairing, whether it's beer or whiskey.
Yeah, this reminds me of a Black Label, but I know the Mummy was actually based on a Black Label, but the Mummy is nowhere near as strong as this one.
No.
The Mummy is much more refined, but I feel like this is just a little more refined than a Black Label. And I actually kind of see what Pete was talking about. So in my interview with him, he said that it starts off strong, and then it kind of lulls you into a false sense of security.
Yes.
By by settling down a lot and then slowly getting stronger. And I'm starting to notice that it's, I mean, it really like it fell off at like maybe an inch or half an inch, and it got way less spicy, and now it's just ramping up.
I'm feeling pretty buzzy, I have to tell you. And you know what? I smoke a lot of really strong cigars. Mm-hmm. I usually drink, my pairings are very strong normally. And after Cuba, you know, the strength really wasn't there. The Cuban cigars are fantastic. I had a lot of beautiful cigars. And that had power to them as well. And
yeah, especially
this is my first
custom
non-Cuban.
rolls. Like custom rolls are a lot stronger than people give them credit for.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, they'll kill you. If you're not used to that kind of smoke, it'll kill you. But I'm feeling a strength on this. It's nice though. It's a really nice, pleasant surprise.
And it's a slow progression, which I like.
Yeah.
Like it's slowly getting stronger, which is I mean, it's exactly what Pete said it was, which I'm surprised by. I wasn't expecting it to be. I wasn't quite expecting it based on the last time I smoked it, which was right off the truck. Like I was out of town, I think, and I got home and my Michaels were here and I smoked one. I don't remember it ramping up this much.
To me, this is almost like, for those of you, if any of you are chili heads out there, this to me is almost like a ghost pepper. Where you get that, you know, you get a lot of flavor on the front end, and you're like, all right, this is pretty good, this is strong. And then you think, all right, I'm done. It's not going to get any stronger than this. And it just builds and builds and builds and builds. The flavor changes. Yes. Yeah. It's kind of like that.
I'm very familiar with that feeling. So when I was out of town for work last week, I was at the office, and we had pizza, and they had like some, I don't know, like it was some store brand. I don't remember what store it was, but it was some store brand Chipotle hot sauce. And I was like, oh, I'll try some of that. And it was pretty good. And then the guy sitting next to me was like, oh, you're having hot sauce? I'll try that on my pizza. And halfway through this slice of pizza, his face was burning up. He was freaking out. And I was telling him that it reminded me of when we were in Nicaragua and you gave out some of that Carolina Reaper chocolate, and people were like going crazy. This dude was doing that over just like store brand hot sauce.
Yeah, man. If you're not used to it, it'll kill you. I recently had the Pakia Reaper chip, the one chip challenge.
Oh yeah, actually, I watched that on Facebook. Yeah.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, that looked pretty hot.
It was, you know what? It was It was not the hottest I've ever had, but it was pretty painful. It was. I was impressed. You know, for a chip,
I would guess that it was on par with that chocolate.
No.
No.
Not even close.
Hotter or not as hot as the chocolate?
Not as hot, believe it or not.
Oh wow!
But then again,
okay, so that's pretty.
A lot of people may not realize that chip was actually their ghost pepper chip. It's not. Oh, really? It's not an all Reaper chip. It's a ghost pepper chip with some Reaper on top.
Oh, I see. Interesting.
So it's a different type of heat.
That sounds like a painful combination. Like ghost pepper and Carolina Reaper are painful in different ways.
Oh yeah.
And when you put them together, I feel like that could get.
Well, you know what makes it worse is when you decide to have a beer, and you know capsaicin is alcohol soluble.
Oh yeah.
So you get the stomach pains. Yeah, bad idea.
So like for me, when I drink something when I eat something spicy, and then I try to have a beer, like it's like bloop, that beer's gone. I need another bloop, that one's gone because it's not quelling the heat.
Oh yeah.
And then you're filled with beer and you're uncomfortable and your mouth is still on fire. It's just bad. And our last segment here is brought to you by Drew Estate. They good, smoke them, go on Cigar Safari. They've got some new releases that have just come out. They've got the Pappy, which is it's a very expensive cigar. They're between $18 and $27 or $28. But that is a really good blend. And then they've also got the Underground Sun-Grown that just came out. That's kind of like, it reminds me a little bit of this kind of style where it's that like light but really spicy kind of flavor. And then they've also got those Coronitas coming out right now. Like those are shipping right now.
I'm pumped.
And I mean, it's interesting because they don't live up to the full flavor of an entire cigar. You can't fit like a 6x52 into that little package. But they scratch that itch. Like if you're craving a T52 when you smoke one of those, you're going to be satisfied. And I think it's awesome that they're coming out with every single traditional blend is going to have a tin. So you're going to be able to get Norteños and Herreras and Undercrowns and Undercrown Shades, Undercrown Sungrowns, T52s, Liga 9s. They've got everything, and I cannot wait to smoke more of those.
I'm excited. Those are all incredible. I love the traditional cigars from them.
Yeah, me too. So I have to go back over my pairings. I've been drinking the beer a little bit. The Ardbeg, as I said, is a miss. Like, I'm not even going to give it a score. That would be like a, I don't know, 60. I don't know how I could score something that bad. It's just not a good pairing because it kills the flavor of the cigar. I'm going to try some of the bourbon here. I'm trying to decide whether the bourbon or the beer works better. So far, I'm leaning towards the beer. Yeah, I think the beer's definitely a better pairing. The beer, I would actually give, and for anybody who hasn't been paying too much attention, that is the Sierra Nevada Fresh Hop IPA. I think it goes really well with this cigar. I mean, the fresh hops, the not too malty, like very light backbone of the beer, I feel like complements the cigar perfectly. I'm going to give that one a 96. I can't think of a better pairing with this cigar, but I'm not giving it 100 because I'm sure there's one out there. I just haven't tried it. Which one is your best pairing, Dennis?
So I think for me, my favorite pairing is the Stillwater, the mango double IPA with the chili and the lemongrass. Really nice, light, easy to drink. As it's warming up, the mango's coming out a little bit, but it's not overpowering the cigar. Unfortunately, as good as the Imperial Stout is, it's kind of a little bit too strong. And the first beer I had, actually, funny enough, I was just drinking it. It's the Catskill IPA. It's got this really interesting orange zest flavor to it now. And you know, initially when it was really cold, it worked well with the cigar, and I think now as it's warming up, it's not quite there. So probably I'd say 92 for the mango chili. And then the next one would have to be the Catskill at about 89, 88. And then about 84, oddly enough, 84 for my whipped, Imperial Stout.
That's sad, because I was really looking forward to seeing you drink that one. So for the early times bottled in bond, like I said, the beer's a better pairing. As we've been talking here, I've been sipping on that and smoking the cigar, and I think that the early times brings out better flavors in the cigar. The cigar brings out the worst flavors in the whiskey. So it kind of brings out that, I mean, like I was talking about before, that varnishy kind of flavor. That's not necessarily a bad thing. The cigar transforms it and makes it a bad thing. It takes on like a bitter, chemically kind of flavor that sticks to the palate a little bit. Which, that's just how pairing goes. Sometimes, these combinations activate your flavor sensors, your what do they call those things? Your taste buds differently. And this combination just doesn't work. I'm going to give that one like an 86. It's not a terrible pairing, but the whiskey is better without the cigar than it is with the cigar.
Okay.
And that we're not quite at the end of our Armed Forces Radio Network segment, but why don't we talk a little bit about your time in Cuba? And actually, before I get to that, Jose asks if I've ever paired a peaty Scotch successfully with cigar. I don't think I've successfully paired Ardbeg. I feel like Ardbeg, because it's got that really light kind of body and that intense peat, doesn't pair well with with most cigars. But I'm trying to remember what it was. There was a few months ago. that John and I both had our Octomore from Bruichladdich at the same time with the same cigar, and the Octomore paired so well with it. And it's weird because the Octomore is like 5 times as peaty as the Ardbeg, but they've balanced it out with so much more flavor on the sweet side that it doesn't taste as peaty as something like Ardbeg. And then I feel like Laphroaig goes really well. I feel like Laphroaig would be the right choice for this. And
yeah, that's a great point.
Laphroaig and Tatuaje Black Label are one of my favorite pairings. I think those two just complement each other perfectly. All right, so now let's get on to
Would
Cuba.
that be the Laphroaig 10 or the
Laphroaig
something
10.
like a quarter cask? Because I've had really good luck pairing the quarter cask. It's a little bit, it's not as edgy.
I usually go with the 10 because I like that raw character that the 10 has.
Yeah.
The quarter cask is a little more balanced. So I feel like actually the quarter cask would probably go better with this cigar than it does with the Black Label. Because the Black Label is a little stronger throughout, and this kind of starts off strong, then gets a little bit milder, and then starts to get strong again. So now let's get back to Cuba. I want to hear all about Cuba.
Man, there's so much to say about Cuba. It's such a weird place because when you go there, it's in the Caribbean, but it doesn't feel like a Caribbean island. I was really only in Havana, so I can't speak for the rest of Cuba, but it doesn't feel like an island at all. When you go there, it's got this sort of time capsule kind of feel to it. And I think a lot of people say that, right? Because of the old cars, the old buildings, things are kind of falling apart in most places. Old Havana is really historic, and there are a lot of beautiful pictures that we've all seen from Cuba. But
yeah,
some of the things I've come back with, first of all, I'd say Cuban food in the U.S., if you've had Cuban food in the U.S., it's nothing like Cuban food in Cuba. Outside of the fact that, hey, socialism, it's a little bit different out there. They really only have access to certain things.
Does that mean the food in Cuba is better than Cuban food in the U.S., or Cuban food in the U.S. is way better, just because we have access to more food?
I think it's two very different things. It's almost like what you would consider Chinese food in the U.S. versus Chinese food in China or anywhere outside of the U.S., right? So it's one of those things. Not necessarily worse and not better, just different.
But totally Americanized, yeah.
Yeah, totally Americanized. I mean, they have the ingredients. They have access to the good stuff. When you go to a restaurant in Cuba, don't be surprised if you ask for half the things on the menu and say, oh, yeah, we don't have it today. Sorry. They just don't have them.
That sounds a lot like Nicaragua.
Yes. When you ask for something, they may or may not have it. But the one thing I noticed about Cuba was interesting. Salad, fresh greens. If your dish comes with a salad, it's not a fresh salad. It's a pickled salad.
Oh, okay. I was going to say,
don't
dare touch that salad.
Oh, no. I'm a fan. But it's all pickled.
I meant in Nicaragua and Mexico, if you eat the salad, that's an easy trip to the bathroom for the next 3 days.
I learned that the hard way my first time in Nicaragua, actually.
I remember. I was there.
But the food is good. It's, you have to kind of set the expectations the right way. Stuff like beef is kind of hard to get. Pork is pretty common. Chicken is also fairly common. Seafood, you may or may not get lucky and find something. Mm-hmm. And it seems like right now Cuba's in a weird place where with all this tourism coming in, they have these really interesting, it's almost like a hipster, almost like I don't want to say it hipster, but sort of hipster cuisine scene out there, where you have a lot of little places popping up that are doing crazy food things. There's a sushi restaurant in Cuba I never went to, but from what I hear is incredible. Wow. Phenomenal sushi in Cuba.
I would not expect that.
And, generally, yeah, absolutely. When you go to most places and you order seafood, they're like, oh, yeah, we don't have seafood today, sorry. You're an island. How do you not have seafood? But that's just the way Cuba is. It's a little crazy. And I actually stayed in a small residential neighborhood, no foreigners really. I did an Airbnb type thing.
Oh, nice.
And man, walking back and forth to the Hotel Nacional to meet all the guys and hang out and stuff. I saw street vendors selling meat, for example, from a cart. and the meat, chunks of meat were hung up on ropes and hooks, just hanging from a cart, and the guy was just hanging out outside. It's like 98 degrees outside. He's just chilling with this meat, this beef.
He's just cooking his meat on the hook in the sun.
So it is very different, absolutely very different. And unfortunately, when I got sick, I stuck to mostly bread and rum.
Of course, as you do.
That was my
you have to sanitize everything.
Oh yeah,
rum.
As far as the cigars, I'd have to say, you know what? Going into Cuba, before Cuba, I was never a Cuban cigar guy. Not really. I've had a bunch of Cuban cigars. They never really did it for me, and I was never a rum guy. Like I went to Nicaragua, I had Flor de Caña. Flor de Caña is great, but it tastes like whiskey for me. It's got that whiskey essence, right?
Whiskey.
Yeah. And then I went to Cuba and I explored this Havana Club stuff and the Maestro and all these great Cuban rums. Phenomenal. Really good stuff. And Cuban cigars took a different life for me also. It's different. I mean, I always smoke stronger cigars in general, and I was able to find a lot of stronger cigars in the custom rolls. Mm-hmm. So like I went to Cuba, but no, I didn't smoke a lot of Cohibas, and I didn't smoke a lot of like the typical brands you hear about. I smoked a lot of custom rolls, and I was lucky enough that, John and the rest of the crew from Canada were giving me like crazy stuff that they were getting from the custom rollers. So I was privileged to smoke great cigars.
Yeah.
And it jaded me a little bit. I brought some, non-Cuban cigars with me, and I smoked a few of them, and I just couldn't get into it. I wanted a Cuban cigar. I was like just hankering for a Cuban cigar when I was there.
I mean, that's kind of the same thing as being in Nicaragua. In Nicaragua, only Nicaraguan cigars taste good.
Yeah.
If you smoke a Cuban or a Dominican cigar in Nicaragua, it doesn't taste right. It's like a thing you can't quantify and you can't explain. But there's something with the air or something. I don't know. But Nicaraguan cigars taste the best in Nicaragua. And I'm sure Cuban cigars taste the best in Cuba.
Yeah. It's really fascinating how that works out.
All right. Here's a question. Yeah. What was the best cigar you smoked on the trip?
Oh, man. You know what? I know the cigar. I don't remember the name. It was a custom roll, but it was a special custom roll. So, I can't remember. It was this crazy custom roll that was like hard to find, and I think the guy is not around anymore, and someone else is rolling those cigars, but on a limited basis.
Oh.
And John would be the guy to ask for that. Like, those were the cigars to get.
All right, I'll ask him next time. What was the best production cigar that you smoked that had a band on it?
Production. You know what? Production cigar that really got me was that impressed me. I smoked a lot of Partagas stuff, like the typical Partagas stuff that everyone's used to. If you've gotten a Cuban cigar, you've probably smoked it. The Partagas stuff is great, and I enjoy it, and I'm a big fan. And I came back with 2 or 3 boxes of Partagas cigars, different cigars. The Ramon Allones, those were phenomenal.
Yeah.
For some reason, like those hit me just in the right spot. The Vitola was just right. Super
I think
sweet.
Part of it is so Ramon Allones and the Partagas Series D are kind of the strong, spicy Cubans.
Yeah. They definitely stick out, and I had a couple of Cohibas that were good, but they didn't evoke that sort of like wow effect on me,
Yeah, I know what you mean. So that brings us kind of to the end of our Armed Forces Radio Network segment. Thanks everybody for listening. Everybody in the Armed Forces, thank you so much for what you do. We really appreciate it. It's, I kind of I have a hard time talking at this part because I don't really know what to say. But I really appreciate what you guys are doing out there. It really means a lot to us back here, protecting our freedoms. I hope you have time to sit down, listen to this, smoke a cigar. I know you don't have whiskey out there unless maybe you smuggled it in. I don't know. But I hope you have time to enjoy it. and get a little bit of time to yourself. So everybody have a great weekend. All right, we're still on. We're in the After Dark segment now. We can talk a little bit more about Cuba. So you talked a little bit about what the food is like at Cuban restaurants. What was the food like at the Partagas Festival, like at the dinners and stuff?
You know what? I don't want it to seem like I'm speaking badly about the Partagas crew. Those guys did a great job. I think something happened with the planning of the event where it was rescheduled, moved kind of a little bit. New caterers, something like that. I heard a couple of other people got sick as well. I wasn't the only one. So not related to Partagas specifically, but the food, when I was eating it, it was wonderful. It was delicious. And then whatever it was, man, like a few hours into the first opening dinner, I just didn't feel right. And it was one of those like, okay, this is going to be bad. And a couple of other guys got sick over the next day or two as well. The closing dinner was really nice. The food was great. But I think because some of the guys were sick prior, they were a little bit nervous about eating some of it.
A little bit hesitant.
Yeah, exactly. The one thing I would say is the closing dinner, the gala dinner, it was beautiful. There was a live band, great musicians, really cool stuff, and just sitting down and eating this, I think it was a 5-course dinner, if I'm not mistaken. But there was an army of people coming in to serve you, and they all served you at the same time. It was insane. Oh, yeah. They marched in with all the plates. It was just a whole production. Every dish was a production. And then you had another crew come in and pour you your wine, and you had another crew after that handing out cigars. And it was pretty cool.
So what kind of cigars did they hand out? I'm very curious about that.
So there was a lot of Partagas stuff, but there was also a lot of Cohiba stuff. It was a lot of the kind of what you would think for typical Cuban cigars. It was nice. Each of the events, to be fair, I only went to 2 events. I went to the opening dinner and I went to the closing dinner. Unfortunately, I didn't do the flight to the plantation. I didn't do that. And I didn't do most of the other events as well. Most of the time was actually spent just kind of walking around and exploring what the local scene was.
Okay. That's cool.
Which was great. I went over to meet one of the rollers, Reynaldo, who makes phenomenal custom rolls, just truly phenomenal, and dirt cheap, like $3 a cigar. US is dirt cheap.
Oh, man.
In Cuba. I came back with a bundle of his cigars. Unfortunately, his cigars that I had in my bag, I was walking along the water, the Malecon, which is their, kind of like waterside street, and I just got destroyed by a wave that came over the wall. Destroyed completely, just soaked, man. Underwear, socks, done. And those cigars, even though they were wrapped, they were soaked too. And so I'm hoping maybe I'll get some of that ocean flavor out of them when I smoke them in a couple of months. We'll see.
Are they kind of ruined?
Well, maybe we'll see what happens. I have them sitting. I freeze them for a little bit. I have them sitting now, and hopefully in a couple of months they'll be okay. But just being able to go and sit down and talk to the roller and hang out with the roller and like the dude, he made us coffee, and we sat down and we talked with him about some of the cigars and some of the tobaccos going into it. It was exciting. It's a different, more personal experience than you would expect.
And John is watching now. So my question for John is, what was that cigar that Dennis smoked that he loved so much that was a custom roll? John, please answer in the comments.
I can't remember the name. Oh, man. It was, I know Keith and John both gave me those cigars. And they were by far the best. Like, I would easily give up all of my laptops for those cigars, for like a bundle.
That's very high praise.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is a cigar. If you're not a cigar smoker and I gave you that cigar and you smoked it, you would love the shit out of it.
John says the big one or the little one?
Little one.
The little one. I'm relaying
exactly
messages from Facebook now. The big one was a Hamlet Salamone from 2013. I wonder if that's the same Salamone he gave me that was amazing.
It is amazing. It's glorious.
The little one he can't say, smiley face.
Yes, exactly. It's one of those.
He can't tell us. Okay.
So he knows.
Yeah.
But you know what? For me, honestly, take away from the trip, all in all, Cuba is a crazy place. It's beautiful. It's really different. But the biggest takeaway for me was just the feeling of family. I don't know how else to put it. It's meeting guys that I've never met before for the first time and sitting down and having a drink, and like all of a sudden you feel like you've known these guys for the longest time. Everyone's super generous, super nice, and we all have something in common. We all love cigars, so it doesn't matter what our backgrounds are, where we're from, how much money we have, whatever. And it's not something you see these days, unfortunately. It's very rare.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that's, I mean, to me, that's the thing about the cigar community that means so much, is that people, no matter who you are, you're welcome. As long as you can find common ground in smoking a cigar, which is not that hard to find like enjoyment in, at least not for me. And I lost Dennis for a second there, but Skype says he's on his way back, so we'll see. Oh, there we go.
All right, I'm back.
You had me worried there for a second.
I lost you for a second there.
All right, well, I think that about ties it up. Do you have anything else to talk about Cuba that I forgot to ask about?
Yes. If you're in the U.S., go to Cuba. If you're not in the U.S., go to Cuba. But especially if you're in the U.S., don't be afraid. Make it happen. It's not hard. It's pretty cheap, and you won't be disappointed. That's the place you need to go, especially if you're into cigars.
All right.
Cigars are beautiful in a lot of places. You have to experience it.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening, watching, commenting. We really appreciate it. We'll be back tomorrow night. We will have Scott Jansen from Warfighter Tobacco Company. I'm really excited to interview him. It's a really cool company making really good cigars. And then we'll be back next week with a brand new episode of Sharing Our Pairings. Everybody have a good night.